Hello, today I have with me Tony Gartland, who writes as AJ Aberford. Hello, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, hi. You've just introduced me. That's exactly who I am. Tony Gartland, writing as AJ Aberford. I'm a new author. I say a new author. I've got three books already published in a series. The fourth due out next week, actually. I live in Malta. The books are based in Malta and feature a rather hapless detective who stumbles from one adventure to another called George Zammit. And he's gradually, through no fault of his own, working his way up the ranks in the Maltese police, encountering all the villains that you might expect to see in the southern Mediterranean. That would include terrorists, corrupt politicians, organized crime syndicates, smugglers. What I basically do is to take the geopolitics of the southern Mediterranean, stories that you'll see in your newspapers, and there's so much material. And the main thing which I try to do is, having read lots and lots of books about disconsolate and happy detectives or policemen who are usually divorced or alcoholics or have sort of a bit of love interest off and on. And I thought, well, having read just one too many of those, I thought I'd try something different. George is a family man. He's henpecked. His daughter dominates him. He's not that successful at work. He has a domineering boss who controls him, gets him to do all sorts of terrible things, and he muddles through. And of course, he usually ends up as the hero, and his reputation enhanced. So it's comedic. It's a little bit of satire on sort of the politics of Malta, which is pretty amazing. But there's thrills, and there's guns, and there's chases, there's adventure, and I try and mix it up. And that's what the series is about.
Have you always wanted to write?
I've always wanted to be a creative. My background is I was a lawyer for many years, for too many years actually, and I got very fed up with that. So I actually left in about 2005, and I started a brewery in Yorkshire, Saltaire Brewery, and that's been going, as I say, relatively strongly. I say relatively strongly in these difficult times with COVID and cost of living, etc. But I retired a few years ago, came to Malta, and having sorted my affairs out, said, right, okay, I will try and put pen to paper. And that was it. And the Zammit series was born. I work with a very good editor who helped me very much sort myself out, get my tone of voice right, gave me very harsh criticism, totally unfair in my view. But she knocked me into shape fundamentally, and the series developed. And now I feel quite confident writing in that series, and her criticisms have become less and less as the series have progressed. So yeah, I'm just about feeling confident enough to say, yeah, I think I'm an author now. Five books in, four published and one in production. So I think I can call myself an author.
After one book, you're an author. I have this argument all the time.
Well, it's when someone says, "What's your occupation?" I still put down retired.
I know you're not terrible, honestly. It's like my lifetime job is to reassure you all.
Well, that's what somebody says. He says, take the compliments and live up to them, because one day they're going to stop, so make the most of it while you can.
Did you always know that it was going to be sort of crime fiction when you did eventually write, or did that just happen by accident?
We'd all love to write the great big novel, the great American novel, but I think you've got to take little steps. And part of the thing of writing in AJ Aberford's name is that if you want to, or if you feel able to kind of switch genres or do something else, then you can do. But it seemed like the idea of bringing something to market to be commercially successful, it's pointless sort of trying to write a 1,000-page first person, sort of novel. That's just not on. So part of the writing thing was to go through the whole process, to write it, to try and get it published, to see what the market was like, to meet people like yourselves and the people who were involved in the book world, because I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's part of the journey. That's what interested me. So having put pen to paper, it's been as interesting to feel your way around the book, the book lover circuit really, and who's involved and what's happening. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning. So was I always interested in crime? It just seemed the natural place to start. And of course, I was a lawyer for many years, so I did know a little bit about, but I wasn't doing police procedural work, that's for sure.
And did you know that when you wrote that first book that it was going to be a series?
Yes, I did. I thought it's not really, it's a series in terms of the same characters and there's character development, but the stories themselves can be read as standalones. But obviously, the deeper you get into writing 6 books or whatever, the first half of the book seems to be about catching up what happened to the previous books. So it's you've got to be careful with that and make sure that you're not just too busy filling in everybody's backstory, and because eventually it takes up the entire novel. But yeah, I did think I would develop it, and I thought commercially you have more credibility if you've got 4, 5, or 6 books out there in the series, rather than somebody picking up a standalone by a first-time author with no reviews saying, what's this? But if they see, well, the guy's done 2, 3, or 4, maybe there are some legs to it. So maybe I'll have a go and read it. That was the motivation for doing the series.
When you sat down to write book 1, was it the idea that came first or the character?
It was probably the character. I wanted to write something around migrant smuggling, because Malta is right in the line of it. And even today, there's people adrift in boats, within the area that Malta is supposed to provide security for. Maltese basically don't take migrants. They push them back. They make Suella Braverman look like the guardian angel. They're hard people. The Italians reluctantly take people in, but the numbers are down. I mean, at one point in the 2014-2015, they had this Mare Nostrum philosophy, which was basically welcoming migrants in, and the Italians would be sweeping people up, just outside of Libyan territorial waters and bringing them into Italy and resettling them. And then there's a change of government in Italy, and they said, forget it. It's not on. But so I wanted to do something about migrant smuggling. Teamed it up with oil smuggling. Malta had a bit of a reputation for taking embargoed oil and outside of territorial waters, shifting it between tankers, and the Russians buy a lot of it. And it's a scandal, but it goes on. So putting those two things together with a maritime feel and sticking good old George Zemit into the middle of it, who can't swim, who's never been off the island before, and sending him to Libya seemed like a bit of a good fun thing to do. Well, for us, not for George.
If you were to take any of your characters out for a meal, who would you choose and what would you ask them?
Well, there's an organised crime syndicate underlying all of this, of course, based in Milan, an old established family who've been around since God knows when, Middle Ages probably, almost like the Medicis. If you imagine the Medici family migrating to the present age, and it's headed up by a beautiful but evil woman called Natasha Bonici, who runs the crime syndicate, who's intelligent, gorgeous, but with a real black heart. And I think she would make a great guest. I'd certainly have to stay on the right side of her. But I think she would be the one. And as the series develops, she has arrived back in Malta, and gradually she's inveigled herself into the family, and through devious means, including a variety of murders, has made her way to the top of, that's a spoiler, of course, I shouldn't be saying things like that. But she's made her way to the top of this particular organization. And then it's really about George pursuing her through the books. George is aware of her. He's compromised by his bosses in her pocket, but gradually he gains courage and fortitude in the later books. He has to stand up to her. So it's an interesting thread, the way that character's developed. And it's a case I always start with a rough plot. I know where I'm going with it, but the characters then take over. And the books tend to kind of write themselves. And I think, oh, how have we ended up here? This is different. But that's very much my process. I'm not a planner, inspirationalist, or whatever the word is. But there's plenty of interesting characters, and I let them run their course, and they tell me what they want to do, which is all part of the fun as far as I'm concerned. Though I've just said it's just disorganized, but it seems to work for me.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone's got their own way, haven't they? So yeah. It's fine. Do you have to do a lot of research?
I do an awful lot of research. I write about things I know nothing about, international terrorism, gun running, and things like this. And it's amazing what you can find. The first book big scenes were set in Libya. I've been to North Africa. Libya is 200 kilometers away from Malta, so it's not far. But it's and I think the geography and the geology are fairly similar. But Google Earth and Google Maps, spent a lot of time on Google Earth and Google Maps, just working out where oil refineries were, where Tripoli was, vis-a-vis other parts of the location that I've used, whether there was a sandy beach or whether there wasn't. And I did read one book where somebody tries to land a plane on a Maltese beach, and they wait for the tide to go down, and this big sandy strip is revealed. And of course, the Mediterranean is not tidal. So, there's a lot of traps you can fall into like that. So I do a lot of research on the scenes and the locations, and also combing the newspapers for threads and for plots and for going Al Jazeera, a lot of the North African stuff to get the names and the feel for what's actually happening. Al Jazeera is a great source. So if you're writing about the Middle East and that sort of area of the Eastern Mediterranean basin, so yeah, it all sounds a bit heavy, but I think it's important to get the details right. And if you don't, someone will tell you.
Oh yes, as crime fiction readers, we know our stuff.
Exactly.
and we'll tell you. Absolutely. Is there any bit of research you've done that's particularly stood out as memorable or fascinating?
Trying to think. I can get so boring about this stuff, so you have to check me if I do. At some point, there's a nuclear warhead which the Americans lose from their base in Turkey, and just working out and just understanding the presence of the Americans in Turkey and what goes on in the air bases. And they have 80 nuclear warheads there, which they daren't move. The Turks want rid of them because politically they don't like the idea of American nuclear weapons being on their soil. The Americans daren't move them because of the risk of terrorist activity or the fact that there may be an accident. So these things are stuck there. And politically, it's a big issue, but you never hear about it. So, of course, one does go missing, and George is sent on the trail of this particular warhead. And, it's what does a warhead look like and how big is it? And if it goes off, what would happen? What is destructive range? These things. And information's all there, right the way down to how it's manufactured and who the suppliers of the various components are. So, yeah, I went far too deep down that rabbit hole. But that was good fun. I did enjoy that.
It sounds fascinating, actually. I must admit, terrifying, but fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you give George any quirks or habits in the first book that you've regretted later on?
Oh, yeah, interesting. Not really. He eats too much. But I think that's part of his charm. He's always got bits of food secreted about his body, half a croissant in a pocket, or at times of stress or conflict, he'll always dip into his pocket to find out if there's something he can nibble on. That's one of his quirks. I don't think I actually regret that, but it does make life a little bit difficult sometimes. So whenever he goes anywhere, he always has to be prepared for food. He ended up in a refugee camp in Syria, and he was saying things like, "I'm starving." And people were saying to him, "You can't say that here." And then he was always complaining about the food and this sort of thing. So that's quite. It's just one of his amusing quirks. But I don't think so. He's a lovable character, and the secret has been trying to keep his charm, but trying to develop him across the series, so he becomes a little bit more forceful, a little bit more decisive, a little less sort of terrified of everything that sort of comes at him, but retains that comedic kind of element, which I hope I managed to do. That's the aim anyway.
How did your deal with Hobeck books come about?
I was introduced by my editor. So I worked with Lynn Curtis. I did the rounds for agents, and I thought by the time this happens, I'm going to be dead. So I thought I can't go through it. But I realized that getting agents was the first step. And then obviously the agent's going to have a look at the book and give you their two penneth worth. So you're going to have to do some work on it. Then the agent has to go out and try and get you a publisher. And then the publisher has to go out and try and sell a book into a bookshop. And then it depends how much support you actually get from that publisher. I started to read stories about people who have been published by the big names, and they sell a dozen books a year or something. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be on that front table, alongside Richard Osman. It doesn't work like that. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought I'll go self-published. And I did go quite a long way down the line to become self-published. I designed the covers. I worked with the cover designers to get that done. Obviously, Lynn had been involved. She'd edited the books and copy edited 2 of them. So I wanted a batch of 3. So insofar as a publisher was concerned, like a small independent like Hobeck, I was probably quite an attractive proposition because some of the work had been done, But they read it and they liked it, and they gave me a ring. They sent me an email. I was in the supermarket. I had tears in my eyes. I was thrilled, So it was great, and they're lovely people. It's just Adrian, Rebecca. I don't know whether you know them, but I mean they're fantastic. You know them. They're fantastic.
Yes.
And it's an ongoing dialogue. They work very hard, and whether it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, you send an email and get a reply straight back. And it's not the sort of relationship you would have if you were with the big publishers. So it's got its pros and cons. And I don't know what you would expect by way of marketing support in these big agencies, in the big publishers. But I think its effort and its attention and its support, I think it's more than compensated for any loss of, access to the bricks and mortar side of the business, because they're very much online and they're very much, digital publishers, as opposed to getting books, getting deals with Waterstones and that sort of thing. So you're not going to get that from a small independent, but you are going to get a lot more support. And if you don't have an agent, then you have to rely on other voices, to tell you what's good and what isn't, where you're going wrong, and to give you that kind of feedback. In particular, as a new author, that's very important. As I say, and full marks to my editor Lynn Curtis, who very experienced, and I was very, very lucky to just find her, and she's great. She's sort of she's a tough nut. Doesn't sort of hesitate in telling me what's what, but hopefully, the end product has been through several iterations, and she's trusted by Adrian and Rebecca at Hobeck, so they don't have to go through the whole sort of editorial side of things, which makes life more efficient and smoother for all concerned. So it's a smoother path with Hobeck and with Lynn Curtis, which I think everyone's appreciates. And obviously, I had a cheaper path to get a book from the desk, to the Amazon front page or whatever.
Yeah. I've met Adrian and Rep. Well, we spent the first Harrogate that we both went to together. We were both, all 3 of us were as nervous as each other, which was quite amusing. And then the next one, we were all more confident, so we went off. But I've watched him grow in confidence as well, which is awesome, and I love seeing them do well. So yeah, I've got a lot of time for both of them. I think they're amazing.
They are. They've got a great brand, and I mean, I listen to the Hobcast, their weekly podcast, and I mean, not sort of as it comes out. Sometimes I'll back them up, but I'll always have a dig in, and they're great the way they've got the industry news and a little bit of background on what's going on, and very honest and upfront people about how they're responding to changes in the industry and what their views are. It's great people, and very pleased to be part of their stable.
I was interviewed on their podcast quite near the beginning, I think.
Oh, well, they've got 110 out now, so I haven't done 110 yet. I have to go back and have a look on her and see what's said. Go back
Yeah.
to the beginning.
God, I can't remember either. It was ages ago. I think it was after I had the first Harrogate, actually, so
Was
quite
it?
a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
God, even I don't remember.
Oh, I'll
I'm
check it
very,
out.
I'm very friendly with Malcolm Hollandrake and Alison Morgan as well. So yeah,
Right.
yeah. They're
That's a
awesome.
problem. Living in Malta, you don't get a chance to go to the festivals and meet people face to face. So I've had a few email chats with people, but it's and I've read. I mean, if I look on the Kindle, I'm gradually working my way through the Hobeck catalogue. So I get to know them through their books rather than face to face.
Yeah, there's quite a few now, actually. They've got loads of books out, haven't they?
Well, I think there's about, I don't know, I get the feeling it's about 30 sort of authors, but they've all got 3 or 4 out. So it must be a fair few. I've done some really good writers, some really good books.
Yeah, they haven't produced a bad book because I usually do the book tours, so I've read most of them. Yeah. Would you not consider coming back over to do any of the festivals?
Well, I think it's probably imposter syndrome. It's I might get found out, but
I'll tell you off. I will tell you. I will message you and tell you off as well about imposter syndrome. Do you know how many? Even Stephen King has imposter syndrome.
Really,
so you wouldn't be any more out of place than anyone else, and I will tell you this until.
Well, I might do. I think it would once I get the series out there, and I feel established. As I say, I still feel as though I'm taking.
You don't need to be established. You'd be fine.
Be nice to me. I'm just taking baby steps.
You can't afford to take baby steps. I didn't take baby steps. I just went for it. So I will tell everyone else. I will tell you off. I have no problem.
Dear, I shouldn't have done
Ask
this.
Adrian Rebecca, yeah.
I knew this podcast was a mistake.
And yet you're still here, so
I'm still here, yes, there we go.
ask Malcolm if I'll tell people off, and I will nag.
I'm sure. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, Harrogate's the one, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously,
Yes.
my house is in Bradford, so it's only about 10 miles away. So I really have no excuse for that.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, you have no excuse.
Okay, you got me.
Okay, good. And then you can meet Adrian and Rebecca and Malcolm and Ali and everyone else.
Good, that would be nice, actually. Yeah.
And Lynn's the loveliest human ever. Lynn Aversia.
Right. I'm just trying to think. Was Lynn the one? There was somebody who was over here in Malta recently. We were trying to meet up, and we never quite made it for one reason or another. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Okay, I'll keep asking.
Right. Okay. My ears are open.
Good. Out of all the books you've written so far, what's been one of the most fun scenes or chapters that you've written?
Most fun scenes or chapters. Quite often I'll put in a little sort of, I don't know, a little sort of an episode, which is part of the narrative, but which is almost sort of self-contained. And there's one of them in the middle of Milan where Natasha, the evil lady, is going through her steps, working her way up through the hierarchy of the family and taking various people out. And there's a description of a car bomb. It sounds a bit gruesome, a bit horrid. But I read quite a lot around what the Red Brigade were up to in the 70s. This was the Italian sort of communists. They kidnapped, there's a famous industrialist that kidnapped, I think it was Aldo Moro. I think it might have been Aldo Moro. But anyway, I read quite a lot around that. I got quite a lot of detail about how the car bomb actually worked. And it was just a description of it. And I know Milan, and I sort of visualized this street down the side of, La Scala, the Opera House, and the various traffic lights. And when the actual bomb went off, which killed Aldo Moro, there was a Moroccan flower seller who happened to be sitting nearby, and he was actually killed by the bomb. So I just basically described the car driving down there and a flower seller on one side of the road, the car actually then exploding, the flower seller being killed, and the glass shattering and coming down, the windows falling out. And that was just end of the chapter, and on you went with the story. But it was just quite a nice little descriptive piece set in a district of Milan, which I knew, which I thought worked quite well. So there's a few things like that which I do, which give me pleasure. I don't know whether anybody else enjoys them, but I do.
Do you hide any secret jokes, messages, or Easter eggs in your books?
Maybe I should start. You're right, maybe I should start. It's a bit late though. I've done 5, and then I've got book 6 lurking. No, I don't. No, I'm just trying to think. I mean, there are quite a lot of secrets and codes, and particularly going back to the medieval-based crime syndicate and insignias, and I quite like the old ancient things and signposts, that sort of stuff. I do like that, but no, I don't hide Easter eggs.
Fair enough. When you do your own edits, what's your most overused word or phrase, or what does your editor tell you off for?
She tells me off for just very ordinary, non-descriptive adjectives, like it was a big tree, it was a large tree, it was a small room. Describe the room, describe the tree. You can't say it was enormous, just say how big it was. It's a tree, everybody knows it's big. So she does quite a lot of that. And I think that's the one that sort of sticks out most. And so usually when I'm tired and you get lazy, you should describe the damn tree, but you just described a dozen trees. This is just a tree. It's an enormous tree. She will say, just say someone's sitting underneath it, or 3 people are sitting underneath it. Don't just say it's enormous. So no, I think that's what I'm watching out for. And the other thing was, she also, you say, very common thing. Very few people describe smells, and she's always saying, what does it smell like? Describe the smell. It's people describe visually what it looks like, but if you actually put a smell into the description, it gives a lot more atmosphere. So if you're sitting by the beach, it's you can describe the sea, but you might describe the sort of the iodine smell of the salt, or the mustiness of it, or the acrid seaweed, or whatever. You can actually put a lot of colour in by using scent, which is a kind of a note to self. I always have that handy when I'm writing.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Especially in the sea, you can describe quite well, I would imagine.
Well, living in Malta, you can. Yeah, you're surrounded by it.
Bedfordshire is, I think, one of the only doubly landlocked counties. So we had to go through 2 counties to get to the sea.
That's a good club fact. I remember that.
Yeah. I don't know why that sticks in my head, but there we are. Now you've learned something today as well.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're able to spend a day with any author, dead or alive, who would you like to spend a day with?
Any author, dead or alive? Well, I had the misfortune when I was at school. I did A-level English, and I loved English, and it should have been my best story. And I was coerced into going into an experimental A-level stream, which did medieval English. And it was horrid. I got a D in English. I mean, that I should have had an A in English. There's no doubt about it. Give me D.H. Lawrence, or any of the sort of the more contemporary sort of stuff. I'd eat it for breakfast. But it was Thomas Brown, Relico de Medici, the Spencer and the Green, Gawain and the Green Knight, metaphysical poets, all in old English language. It was grim. It was grim. There was about 6. I just gave up. I just couldn't do it. But I loved Chaucer. I thought Chaucer was fabulous. I thought, the humour, the sort of intelligence. I thought his take on contemporary life at the time was wonderful. So I think as long as he spoke modern contemporary English, that would be a prerequisite of it. But I do like it. And of course, Stephen King would be fantastic. I think Stephen King is just the most naturally gifted storyteller. And the way he can just twist a little tale around and make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, I find absolutely wonderful. So, yeah, there's so many. It's And I've just read just got my Kindle. Elizabeth Mantell, sorry, not Mantell, it's Hilary Mantell. I mean, Hilary Mantell. I mean, I could like a chat with her if she would come back from beyond and visit. Her work's absolutely fabulous. I was like a kid with Harry Potter waiting for the next, Wolf Hall book to come out. And I read some of her stuff, which was based in the Middle East, where I think it must have been a very early novel, when she was, her husband was, I think, Shell oil executive. And she actually went to Saudi, and she spent some time as a landlocked, housebound wife in Saudi. And she wrote a book called Murder on Hasdra. I can't say it in the Arabic. Howdesh Street, I think it is. And it's a story about a British expat who lives in a house, and she's obviously semi-autobiographical. She's all senseless, and some funny goings on across the hall, and it involves the murder of a neighbour. And it's just a very simple kind of crime story. And you think that she went on to do something like that, to do something like the Wolf Hall trilogy. Like it shows us hope for us all, because that's a very, very simple story to go on to do something as wonderful as that trilogy. And I would love to know what that journey was. So that would be a great conversation to
have. If you're able to travel to any period of time, either forwards or backwards, just for a visit, where would you like to go to?
See, I always find this a trick question, because it always comes down to a question of dentistry. The idea of living in the Middle Ages where there's no dentist, I would just find absolutely horrendous.
Well, you'd just be popping in for a day, so you wouldn't have to worry. Yeah, or a week or whatever. So you wouldn't have to worry about the horrendous lack of antibiotics and things like that.
Or the disgusting sort of corners in Hampton Court and things like that. I think Elizabethan times, I think, would be pretty fantastic. I mean, the adventure and the intrigue, and you run the risk of getting executed and burnt alive or whatever. But I do find Elizabethan times quite fascinating, and the times of the religious kind of conflict in the late 16th, early 17th century. It's very, 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 very sort of, very, very interesting, and great architecture. And I'd have to be at the top of the tree, sitting there with the swans on the table. I wouldn't want to be down in the filth in the street or anything like that. Please no. But interesting characters, politics, Machiavellians, carrying on. So yes, that would be interesting.
What's been your absolute highlight so far of your author journey, from book one, when you became an author, not book 4?
Yeah, from book 1, right? Okay. I mean, one of the highlights, obviously, was getting the email from Adrian and Rebecca. That was great. And when it went to Malta, they were successful in selling 1,000 copies into a distributor in Malta. So Malta has one book distributor, which makes life easy, and they have like 20 or 30 shops. So everywhere I go, I see my book on the shelf. And if you go into Malta International Airport, it was #2 bestseller for weeks. So I always used to go and stand underneath it and do a selfie, knowing it wouldn't last long. Then one day I went in, it was #7, and I was mortified. Then it fell to #11. I hadn't been back in for a while, so I dread to think where it is now. But we'll see. But no, going into Malta International Airport, seeing it on the shelf was a big deal. That's the same.
Who was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, Jenny Agutter. Railway Children. Oh, if I could have her as an elder sister, I would have been made up. Yeah. I mean, I still quite like her and sort of call the midwife. She's got better with age, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure I'd go out with a nun.
No, yeah. Well, she did leave it, didn't she? And then went on and done something else, didn't she? So.
No, good for her. I didn't realise that.
Ah, yeah. You've got to watch it all.
No, I don't.
No, fair enough. If I was to ask your nearest and dearest what your most annoying habits are, what would they say?
Oh, leaving wardrobe doors open, piles of clothes everywhere. I know them all too well. I think that's the main thing. I always get up first, She said, when I wake up, I just hate looking out and just seeing your wardrobe door open. You know, such a simple thing to do, but I don't do it deliberately, honestly. I really don't.
Yeah, that would drive me insane as well. I have to say I hate that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm with you.
That was a really easy one. Did you saw how easily I answered that?
I know, that was like there on the tip of your tongue.
It must be true.
What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Well, not writing, eat. I love cooking and food and stuff. I love shopping and the cooking. And because we kind of, I write in the mornings, I've got quite a good regime. I sort of start fairly at 8:39 and I go through till about 12:30. But I tend to walk out and go to the shops. We live near lots of good shops, buy stuff for lunch and, you know, stretch my legs, come back. Then in the afternoons, I might a mountain bike, a cycle. So I enjoy doing that. Obviously, there's chores and admin and stuff which have to be done in the afternoons. And in the summer, it can be 35 plus. So it's hot. I'll swim because we live 200 yards from the water. So that's great. I do something every day exercise-wise. Then in the evenings, when it gets to 6, I walk to a supermarket, which is about a mile away. I buy a bottle of wine, food for the dinner, come back, I do podcasts, cook. Then by that time we eat late, Mediterranean. And then probably 10 o'clock, something on Netflix. And that's it. I'm usually in bed by 12. So and I have a good 7 hours sleep. So that usually is my day, unless, of course, we have visitors. And living in Malta, you know, we get visitors. And I love them all. When everybody comes, you see, they're on holiday. So it's party time, you know, and it's their hands are in the fridge. Have a beer, Tony. So it's only 10 o'clock. Let's have a beer, you know. So that tends to disrupt things.
It doesn't sound like you mind too much.
No, I did get stopped by the police a couple of years ago in the airport, accusing me of being an unlicensed taxi driver on the basis I'd been there so many times in the preceding week doing pickups and drop-offs. But you know, I think when we first came across to Malta, there were a lot of visitors, a lot. Now I kind of made it known. It was sort of, you know, we're happy with like one week in the summer, 1 week in 4. So we have one family per week, you know, for a week, and then give us the rest of the month off. Then we'll do another one. But of course, if it's sons and daughters and grandchildren, they just arrive, you know, and you can't turn them away, really. Unfortunately.
Well, I don't think I have any more questions for you, unless you think there's anything pressing that I haven't asked you that you want to tell us.
It's been great. It's been great. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. And obviously, we're going to meet up in Harrogate, aren't we?
Yes. I will literally send you a message every week, and then I'll go daily if I have to. And if I have to, I'll go hourly. I'm not even joking.
Oh my God.
I've nothing else to do. It's fine.
Well, even great. Right. Good. Okay. It's been fantastic. So thank you so much for setting it up and having a chat. I've really enjoyed it.
You're very welcome. Do you have any books to hand that you can show off?
Yes, I do.
There we go. Marvellous. So everyone knows what they're going to go buy.
These are waiting to be signed for somebody. So this is Bodies in the Water. You'll see that's Valletta in the background. And that is the Grand Harbour with the migrant boat. There's a little icon. This is the second one. This is Bullets in the Sand. And I don't know, I'm kind of thinking about a reworking of this. I think it's a little macho, but it's not really a macho sort of men's adventure book in its entirety, but it just appears to be. So I'm not 100% keen on that one. And this one is The Hawk at the Crossroads. And anyone who's been to Istanbul will recognize that. And the Hawk is a Turkish fixer. That's what he calls himself. And he basically, well, he's a bad guy, makes George's life most uncomfortable. and he teams up with Natasha. So that's great, and it's all about the Bosphorus and Turkish and the Greek head-to-head about resources and oil and more southern Mediterranean stuff.
And if anyone would like to find out more about you, where could they do so?
I have a website, which is just ajaberford.com, and all the details are on there. And the one thing I have to do is to plug Book 4, which is now available on pre-order, and it is actually available on 15th of March on Amazon or through Adrian and Rebecca directly at Holbeck Books.
And I will post in my group on the day when it's released anyway, so I'll
You're
remind
marvellous.
everyone.
You're marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. You do.
Thank you, and thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers, Donna.